The sound that still wakes me up at night isn't a scream or a crash. It's laughter. My own family laughing as they drove away and left me standing in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't a grandmother then, just a woman trying too hard to keep a marriage alive that had been dying for years. It happened off a quiet stretch of Highway 80 in New Mexico. There was only one gas station, one broken vending machine, and desert stretching out on all sides. I had gone inside for 2 minutes. That was all. "Ev, can you grab me a drink? I'm beat," Derek had said from the driver's seat, leaning back like a man who expected the world to serve him. His brothers, Logan and Mason, were in the back of the truck, loud and restless. They had a small online channel where they filmed their so-called pranks. I used to tell myself it was harmless. Boys being boys. That was the lie I lived with back then. I walked inside that gas station thinking it was just another stop. I walked out into the moment that changed my whole life. The truck wasn't by the pump anymore. It was rolling toward the road. At first, I thought Derek was pulling forward. Then I heard Mason shout, "Good luck, Evelyn. Hope you brought hiking shoes." I froze. The truck picked up speed. Dust flew everywhere. "Derek," I yelled, running after them. "Stop the truck. This isn't funny." But to them, it was. Logan leaned out with his phone, recording me, recording my fear like it was entertainment. The truck turned onto the road and kept going until the dust swallowed it. I stood there with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might shake loose. 5 minutes passed, then 15, then 40. The sun beat down on me. My throat felt tight. I looked up the highway every few seconds, expecting headlights. Nothing, only heat, wind, and silence. A text came through just as my phone dropped to 1%. "Don't be mad, just a prank. We'll come back soon." That text did not comfort me. It cleared the fog I had been living in. I wasn't loved. I was tolerated. And when people tolerate you, they think your pain is theirs to play with. I leaned against the wall of that gas station and felt something inside me shift. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was clarity. I didn't want them to come back. Not after this. Not ever again. My phone died in my hand. My wallet was in the truck. My charger was in the truck. Everything I needed to get home was rolling across the desert in the hands of 3 men who called me family. I was still standing there when an old silver SUV pulled in. The woman driving glanced at me once, then twice. Her voice was soft but cautious. "Are you all right?" I shook my head. "Not right now." She looked at my empty hands, looked at the road, looked back at me. "Where are you headed?" "Anywhere north," I said. It was all I could manage. She nodded toward the passenger door. "I can take you as far as Santa Rosa. You need a lift." I didn't hesitate. I got in, I buckled my seatbelt, and I stared out the window as the gas station disappeared behind us. I wasn't scared anymore, just done. That was the day I stopped belonging to a man who never saw me and started finding the woman I had buried to keep him comfortable. I didn't know it then, but that ride in the silver SUV was the moment my old life ended. It didn't end with shouting or divorce papers. It ended quietly, with the sound of tires rolling over desert gravel as I left everything behind. The woman driving introduced herself as Carla. She had 2 children in the back seat, both absorbed in a video playing on a cracked tablet. She didn't pry, she didn't stare. She just handed me a bottle of water and said, "You look like you've been standing in that heat too long." I murmured a thank you and looked out the window. The desert stretched endlessly. It felt like the world was reminding me how small my marriage truly was. For the first hour, neither of us spoke. Silence felt safer than explanations. When we reached Santa Rosa, she pulled into a small bus station with a faded sign. She parked, turned to me, and said, "You don't have to tell me everything, but I know someone running from something when I see it." Her words hit deeper than she realized. She opened her purse and pressed a $10 bill into my hand. "For food," she said. "And here's a charger. You can use it inside." Her kindness almost brought me to tears, and I hadn't cried once that whole day. Not when the truck drove away, not when the text came, not when the heat made my vision blur. but one stranger's kindness almost cracked the dam. I thanked her again. She squeezed my shoulder, then drove off, leaving me alone under the station's flickering lights. I wasn't scared anymore, just done. That was the day I stopped belonging to a man who never saw me and started finding the woman I had buried to keep him comfortable. I didn't know it then, but that ride in the silver SUV was the moment my old life ended. It didn't end with shouting or divorce papers. It ended quietly, with the sound of tires rolling over desert gravel as I left everything behind. The woman driving introduced herself as Carla. She had 2 children in the back seat, both absorbed in a video playing on a cracked tablet. She didn't pry, she didn't stare. She just handed me a bottle of water and said, "You look like you've been standing in that heat too long." I murmured a thank you and looked out the window. The desert stretched endlessly. It felt like the world was reminding me how small my marriage truly was. For the first hour, neither of us spoke. Silence felt safer than explanations. When we reached Santa Rosa, she pulled into a small bus station with a faded sign. She parked, turned to me, and said, "You don't have to tell me everything, but I know someone running from something when I see it." Her words hit deeper than she realized. She opened her purse and pressed a $10 bill into my hand. "For food," she said, "and here's a charger. You can use it inside." Her kindness nearly brought me to tears, and I hadn't cried once that whole day. Not when the truck drove away, not when the text came, not when the heat made my vision blur. But one stranger's kindness almost cracked the dam. I thanked her again. She squeezed my shoulder, then drove off, leaving me alone under the station's flickering lights. I charged my phone just enough to turn it back on. No missed calls, not even from Derek, not even from his brothers. That silence told me everything. For a long time, I stared at the route map on the wall. I didn't know where to go. Home wasn't home anymore. Marriage wasn't marriage anymore. All I had was a small voice inside me whispering one name. My aunt, Aunt Darlene, a woman I hadn't spoken to in almost a decade. When my mother died, the distance between us grew. Not from anger, just from life pulling us into different corners. I didn't know if she'd even answer. But when the world drops you, you reach for whatever route you can find. So I sent one message on that dying phone. "Can I come stay for a while? I don't know where else to go." I expected silence. I expected disappointment. I expected nothing. A minute later, she replied, "Of course, always." Those 2 words steadied me. They felt like the first safe breath I had taken in years. I bought the cheapest bus ticket heading east. One way, no return. My hands trembled as I paid with the last bills I'd tucked inside my sock that morning, a habit from growing up poor that ended up saving me. The bus left after sunset. I took the window seat and pulled my knees up to my chest. The desert blurred into dark shapes. Streetlights stretched into long lines. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to absorb the reality of what was happening. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't regret. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Derek had always told me marriage was about sticking together no matter what. Even when his jokes cut deep. Even when his brothers humiliated me. Even when I swallowed my hurt and called it love. But that night, staring out the bus window, I realized the truth. Marriage is not supposed to feel like fear. It is not supposed to feel like waiting for the next betrayal. Hours passed. People got on and off. But I stayed awake, watching the road carve a path between my old life and the one I hoped to build. By sunrise, the bus crossed the state line. I pressed my forehead to the glass and let the cool morning air seep through the cracks around the window. I didn't know what waited for me at the end of this journey, but I did know one thing with absolute certainty. I was not going back. People think betrayal only happens in loud moments, but sometimes the deepest betrayal is quiet. It's when the people who promise to protect you don't even notice you're gone. When that bus finally rolled into Brookside, the sky was a pale gray and the air felt cooler, softer. Brookside was a small town tucked between pine trees and a slow river. I stepped off the bus with one small bag, a dead phone, and a name written on a slip of paper. Darlene Harper, my mother's older sister. the woman I had once adored as a child. I scanned the parking lot, unsure what I was even looking for. Then I saw her. Leaner than I remembered, hair more silver than brown, but the same steady eyes. The same way she stood with one hand on her hip, like she was ready to handle whatever came at her. "Evie," she called out. I hadn't heard that nickname in years. It almost broke me. I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. She walked straight to me and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than it needed to, and exactly as long as I needed it to. She didn't ask why my hands were empty. She didn't ask where my husband was. She didn't ask why my eyes looked hollow. "Let's get you home," she said simply. Her house sat on a quiet street with crooked mailboxes and porches that had seen better paint jobs. It was small, but it felt alive. Potted plants on the steps, wind chimes on the porch, curtains that actually let in sunlight. Inside, it smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. Familiar, safe. She pointed toward the hallway. "Bathrooms on the left, guest rooms at the end. There are clean towels. Take your time." I stood under that shower for what felt like an hour. I scrubbed off dust, sweat, and years of pretending I was okay. When I stepped out and caught my reflection in the mirror, I barely knew that woman. I saw someone who looked older than her age, someone who had learned to smile without her eyes, someone who had been shrinking herself to fit into a life that never fit. I wrapped the towel tighter and whispered to my reflection, "You're not going back." When I finally came to the kitchen, Darlene had a plate of eggs and toast waiting. She didn't push conversation. She didn't prod my wounds. She just slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a small stack of bills and a folded sticky note. On it was written, "Nora Lane. Start here." I frowned. "What is this?" "A name," she said. "Yours, for now. And a friend of mine who owns a diner down by the river. She needs help. She'll pay cash, no questions." I stared at the name. Nora. I rolled it around in my head. Nora Lane. It felt strange, but also freeing, like a coat taken off a hook after years of dust. "What about Evelyn?" I asked quietly. Darlene looked at me with something like sorrow and pride all mixed together. "You can be her again when you're ready. Right now, you need a name that isn't attached to pain." So I became Nora. I walked into the Riverbend Diner that Friday and introduced myself like I had never been anyone else. It was a small place with squeaky booths and a view of the water out back. The owner, Jean, sized me up with sharp eyes and a kind smile. "You ever wait tables?" she asked. "Years ago," I said. She shrugged. "You can start tomorrow. Morning shift. Cash at the end of the day." Just like that, my new life began. No vows, no rings, no brothers filming my every move. In the mornings, I poured coffee, took orders, and wiped down counters. At night, I sat on Darlene's porch with a blanket over my knees, listening to the river and the crickets. For the first time in years, no one was laughing at me. No one was recording my pain. No one was turning my discomfort into content. But peace has a way of making old memories louder. And as the days passed, I started to remember things I had worked hard to forget. The first prank. The first time they called me too sensitive. The first time I realized Derek chose their approval over my safety. I thought I had left the betrayal behind in the desert. I didn't know then that my past was already looking for me. And it was closer than I realized. Peace didn't return all at once. It came in small pieces. A quiet morning, a soft breeze, a cup of coffee poured without someone mocking how I held the mug. But peace can be fragile. And mine shattered the day a man stumbled into the diner covered in blood. It was a slow Tuesday morning. The kind where the only sound in the Riverbend Diner was the hum of the old refrigerator and the soft clink of dishes as I set tables. I was refilling sugar jars when the bell over the door gave a sharp jingle. A man walked in, tall and broad-shouldered, but unsteady. His shirt was soaked down one side, deep red. For a second, I thought someone was filming another prank, and my whole body tensed. But then I saw his face, pale, shaken, real pain in his eyes. He gripped the counter with one hand and whispered, "Help me, please." Then he collapsed. Everything inside me went cold. I rushed forward on instinct. "Sir, can you hear me?" Jean grabbed the phone and called for help while I pressed a towel against the wound on his side. His breathing was shallow, but steady enough to hold on to. "You're going to be okay," I said quietly. "Just stay with me." His eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he really saw me. Not as a waitress, not as someone to laugh at, just as a human being helping another human being. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible. That was the first time I heard his voice. His name, I learned later, was Mark. When the paramedics arrived, they worked fast. They loaded him onto a stretcher, but before they wheeled him out, he reached for my wrist. His grip was weak but determined. "You saved my life," he said. I didn't know why those words mattered so much. Maybe because no one in years had spoken to me like my existence made a difference. I didn't expect to see him again. Men like him rarely stick around. But a few days later, the bell above the diner door jingled again. There he was, a bandage across his ribs, bruises on his jaw, standing straight but slow. He walked to the same booth by the window. "You servin' today?" he asked. I nodded. "What can I get you?" "Coffee," he said. "And your name?" I hesitated. Names had become a fragile thing in my life. But I finally said, "Nora." He nodded, like he understood that some things carried weight. From then on, he came in every few days. Always the same booth, always the same quiet presence. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice was steady, calm, gentle. It felt strange after years of being surrounded by men who talked over me. Mark had a way of asking questions that didn't pry, a way of listening that didn't judge, a way of sitting in silence that didn't feel empty. One rainy evening, long after summer had faded into early fall, I walked home from the diner with my coat wrapped tight around me. The wind stung my cheeks, the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. When I reached Darlene's porch, I saw someone sitting on the steps. My heart jumped into my throat. But it wasn't Derek. It wasn't Logan or Mason. It was Mark. His clothes were damp from the rain, his hair stuck to his forehead. He looked tired, like he had been running from something and finally ran out of road. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in." He hesitated. Then he walked inside, dripping water on the floor, shoulders tight like he was bracing himself for rejection. I handed him a towel, put water on the stove for tea, sat across from him while the storm beat against the windows. And then he told me the truth. "I used to be a detective," he said quietly. "Big city narcotics. I got too close to something I shouldn't have. My partner was dirty, set me up. The shootout, I wasn't supposed to survive." I didn't interrupt. I didn't flinch. I just listened. "They covered it up," he continued, "called it a drug deal gone wrong. I lost everything. My badge, my apartment, my name. I needed somewhere to disappear." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the only runaway in the room. "You're safe here," I said. He nodded, breathing out slowly. Not relief exactly, but something close. He slept on the couch that night. And for the first time since leaving Derek, I didn't have nightmares. But peace, as I would soon learn, never lasts long when the past has unfinished business. And mine was already closing in. Trouble doesn't always announce itself with a knock. Sometimes it shows up in little signs. A drawer left open. Footprints where there shouldn't be any. A feeling in your bones that something has shifted. For weeks after that stormy night, Mark drifted into my world like a man trying not to take up space. He'd help Darlene fix the back fence. He'd walk me home after late shifts. He'd sit on the porch while I knit or made notes for the diner schedule. He never pushed, never asked too much, never made me feel small. It was a quiet rhythm, the kind I didn't know I needed. But peace has a way of making danger easier to see. One evening, I came home to find the front door cracked open. Just a sliver, but enough to raise the hair on the back of my neck. Darlene was out at her church meeting. The house should have been locked. I stepped inside slowly. The living room was untouched. The kitchen looked normal until I reached the counter. One drawer was wide open. Not the junk drawer, not the utensil drawer, but that drawer. The one where Darlene kept her emergency cash, her in case the world falls apart money. Nothing looked missing, yet it felt wrong. Too deliberate, too careful. I didn't move another inch. I backed out the door and called the one person I knew would come. Mark arrived in less than 5 minutes. He didn't ask why my voice shook. He didn't treat me like I was imagining things. He stepped inside first, checked every room, every corner, every window latch. Then he came back out with his jaw tight. "That drawer wasn't left open by accident," he said. My stomach dropped. "So someone was here?" He nodded once. "Someone who wanted you to know it." I felt cold all over. "Me?" "Not Darlene," he said. "Not the house. You." He paced for a moment, thinking the way cops do when they're running the angles in their mind. Then he muttered, "This isn't random." I felt my knees weaken. Can it be Derek? He didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he didn't want to say it out loud. After that night, the house didn't feel as safe. Mark changed every lock, installed a small camera on the porch, put a flashlight by each doorway. He insisted I text him anytime I walked somewhere alone. He wasn't overbearing. He was steady, protective, present. Even Darlene noticed. One night while folding laundry, she looked at me and said, "Sometimes the danger isn't that someone wants you back, it's that they want to prove they can still reach you." Her words sat heavy in my chest. I tried to settle back into my routines, the diner, the river walks, evenings on the porch with Darlene, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I caught shadows where they shouldn't be, footsteps behind me that vanished when I turned. And then one morning, a familiar car drove past the diner, a black pickup, the same model Derek used to drive, although I couldn't see the license plate from where I stood. My hands trembled so badly I spilled the coffee I was pouring. Jean looked at me with concern. "You all right?" "I'm fine," I whispered, though I wasn't. That afternoon, I walked home with a knot in my stomach. The air felt heavier. The river sounded sharper. When I reached the porch, I froze. Someone was standing there. A silhouette. Broad shoulders, hands in pockets. Too still. Too familiar. My breath caught. I walked closer, each step slower than the last, and when I finally saw his face, the world tilted. Derek. 5 years older, thinner, eyes hollowed out like guilt had been chewing on him for years. "Evelyn," he said, "please, can we talk?" My whole body went cold. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at the man who once vowed to love me and then left me to burn under the desert sun. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps behind me. Mark stepped up beside me, silent and steady, positioning himself between us without hesitation. Derek's eyes widened. "Who are you?" he asked. Mark didn't raise his voice, didn't posture, didn't flinch. Someone who's not going to let her be hurt again. The porch felt too small for what was happening, like the past and present had collided in the doorway and only one of them would survive. I stepped around Mark, my voice calm and flat. "I'm not your wife anymore." Derek swallowed hard. "I know, but please, just 5 minutes." Everything in me wanted to run, everything in me wanted to scream. But instead, I nodded once and stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Because this wasn't about giving him power, this was about taking mine back. Closure doesn't come with shouting matches. It doesn't come with dramatic speeches. Sometimes, closure comes when you look someone in the eye and finally see them for who they really are. When I stepped onto that porch with Derek, the air felt too still. The trees barely moved. The river sounded far away. It was as if the world itself was waiting to hear what would happen next. Derek shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the floorboards like he was afraid to meet my gaze. 5 years can change a person, but guilt ages a man faster than time ever could. I've been looking for you, he said. I didn't respond. I waited. He took a long breath. It started with the video. My stomach tightened. What video? He rubbed the back of his neck like he was bracing for impact. My brothers started this podcast, just dumb stories from our past. And one day, they told the whole gas station thing, every detail. I stared at him without blinking. He continued. They thought it was funny. They bragged about it. And people online, well, they didn't think it was funny at all. It went viral. Millions of views. Folks calling them monsters. People asking what happened to you. Some even trying to track you down. He paused and looked up at me. That's when everything hit me. What I did. What I let them do. I left them after that. I walked away from the whole thing. You walked away from them, I said calmly, but you walked away from me years before that. He flinched. I thought you were just mad, he whispered. I expected you to cool off and come home. I didn't know you were gone for good. That's the problem, I said. You never knew. You never listened. You thought I was overreacting every time your brothers humiliated me. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself, just nodded slowly. I deserve all of that, he said. There it was, the apology I once begged for. An apology that no longer meant anything. I crossed my arms. Why are you here now? His voice cracked. Because I needed to tell you that I regret it. Every day. I regret what we did to you, what I did to you. And I needed you to know that I'm not the same man. I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the man I loved. I saw the man who had broken me in small, steady ways. The man who laughed as I chased after a truck that would never stop for me. Before I could respond, the door behind me opened. Mark stepped outside, calm, silent, present. Derek stared at him, confused. Who is he? My fiancé, I said, with a steady voice that surprised even me. Derek looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. His eyes dropped to the porch. His shoulders sagged. I guess I deserve that too, he murmured. No, I said. This isn't punishment. It's just reality. He swallowed hard. I'm glad you're alive and safe. I know. He turned to leave, walking halfway down the steps before he stopped and looked back. For what it's worth, I hope you never have to see me again. Then he walked into the gray light of the evening and disappeared down the sidewalk. I didn't chase him. I didn't call after him. I didn't look back. Mark stepped closer. You all right? I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I'm free, I said softly. For the first time, I'm free. That night, I sat on the porch alone. The river sounded louder than usual. The wind felt gentler. And for the first time since the day I was left in the desert, I wasn't waiting for the next blow. But the past wasn't finished. Not yet. And closure has a way of circling back when you least expect it. People think healing is quiet, but sometimes healing walks you straight into a courtroom filled with the very people who once treated your pain like a joke. It had been months since Derek showed up on that porch. Months since I'd taken back my name, my voice, and the parts of myself I once hid to keep a broken marriage alive. I was settling into my life as easily as one settles into a warm chair after years of standing. Mark and I were engaged by then, though the engagement wasn't an event with rings and speeches. It was a moment, a quiet conversation, a promise made without pressure. But my past wasn't done with me, and it came back in a way I never expected, through the law. One morning, as I poured coffee for the regulars at the diner, a news alert flashed on the small TV in the corner. Online prank duo under fire. The anchor described two brothers, Logan and Mason, whose latest prank had gone too far. They had rigged a coworker's office with hidden cameras, fake eviction notices, and exploding shaving cream canisters. The young woman had panicked, collapsed, and suffered a seizure. She survived, barely. Their channel, once popular, was now a national scandal. Lawsuits were piling up. And when I learned their hearing would be held in the county courthouse 2 towns over, something in me knew I had to be there. Not for vengeance, for truth. The courthouse hallway smelled like paper and old wood. Reporters swarmed outside, snapping photos. I walked in wearing a navy blazer, my hair pulled back, Mark holding my hand with a steady firmness that anchored me. Inside, Logan and Mason sat at the defense table. They were smaller now, not physically, but in presence. Their arrogance was gone, their swagger replaced by fear. And behind them, almost hidden, sat Derek. He looked like a ghost of the man I once married. Shoulders slumped, eyes sunken. He didn't speak to them, didn't laugh with them, didn't even lift his head when they whispered frantically among themselves. When I entered the room, his eyes met mine for a brief second. No anger, no entitlement, just resignation. The prosecutor called witnesses, doctors, the young woman they had tormented. Her testimony shook the room. The moment she described the fear, the same kind of fear I once tasted in the desert sun, I knew why the prosecutor asked for me. When they called my name, I walked to the stand. My heartbeat was steady, my hands didn't tremble. I told the truth, all of it. How I had been stranded miles from home, how they laughed while I ran after the truck, how the video of my fear had become their content, how the humiliation had carved scars deeper than any bruise could. But I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't break. I simply told the court what betrayal feels like when it's repeated so many times you start to confuse it for normal life. When I finished, the room fell silent. Logan shifted uncomfortably. Mason stared at the table. And Derek, he looked like a man realizing his own legacy was tied to a cruelty he once called harmless fun. After the session, I stepped outside into the bright sunlight. Reporters rushed forward, but their voices became background noise. Mark stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, waiting without judgment, without questions. Derek followed me out. Not quickly, not desperately. Just a man carrying the truth he should have seen years ago. "I don't know what I thought would happen today," he said. "I do," I replied. "You thought I'd still be the woman who stood behind you no matter what." He swallowed hard. "Do you hate me?" "No," I said softly. "I just don't belong to you anymore." His shoulders sagged. "And him?" He nodded toward Mark. "Him?" I repeated. "He didn't find me whole. He found me broken. And he didn't try to fix me or mold me. He just stayed." Derek nodded once. No anger, no bitterness, just the quiet understanding of a man who finally saw the aftermath of his choices. Then he stepped back. "Goodbye, Evelyn." "Goodbye," I said. He walked away alone. And I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free, truly free. But even then, even in the sunlight of that courthouse, I didn't know that there was one more turn left in my story, one last twist waiting to reveal itself. Freedom doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it settles softly, like dust on old wood, until one day you realize the air is finally clear enough to breathe without flinching. After the trial, life didn't snap back into place overnight. Healing never works like that. But the weight I'd carried for years was gone, and even the quiet felt different, lighter, kinder. I moved back into Darlene's house for a while longer. She was slowing down, and I didn't want her rattling around that place by herself. We'd sit on the porch in the evenings, wrapped in blankets, listening to the river and trading stories. She never once mentioned Derek or the courtroom unless I brought it up. One night, as we watched the fireflies blink in the yard, she said, "You found your way back to yourself, Evie. That's the hardest journey a woman can make." I didn't answer. I just leaned my head on her shoulder. Those were the last months I had with her, before age and sickness took her quietly, the way she lived. I held her hand when she passed. I thanked her for opening her door when I had no name, no hope, and nowhere left to run. After the funeral, I walked the trail behind her house, the same one I had walked 100 times since the day I arrived. The leaves were turning then, reds and golds, the kind of colors that remind you change can be beautiful, not just painful. Mark met me at the bend in the trail. He didn't say anything at first. He just offered his hand, and I took it. "You ready?" he asked gently. "For what?" I asked. "For the rest of your life." There wasn't a big proposal, no rings, no planned moment. We just looked at each other, both of us carrying our old wounds in the open, and decided to build something new, something honest, something steady. We married quietly at the courthouse a few months later. I wore a simple cream dress. He wore a dark suit that fit just right. There were no guests, no cameras, no speeches, just two people choosing each other without pressure or performance. Afterward, we walked down the courthouse steps hand in hand. No reporters this time, no past chasing me down, just sun on my face and the man beside me who had become my safe place. But even on the happiest days, old memories don't vanish. They sit in the corners of your mind, watching, waiting, and sometimes they tap you on the shoulder when you least expect it. It happened one morning while I was sweeping the porch. A black truck drove by, same model Derek used to drive. My heart skipped, just one beat, then another. The truck didn't slow down, didn't stop. It disappeared around the corner. And I realized something important. Fear no longer controlled me. Memory no longer ruled me. I could see a shadow of the past without losing myself in it. I wasn't Evelyn who chased after a truck. I wasn't the woman stranded in the desert. I wasn't a victim of anyone's idea of a joke. I was a grandmother by then. I was a wife again, but this time to a man who understood tenderness. I was a woman who had rebuilt her life from scraps. A woman who learned that survival is just the first step. Living comes next. Sometimes my grandchildren ask me, "Grandma, how did you know leaving was the right choice?" And I tell them this. If someone finds joy in your fear, that's not love. If someone laughs at your pain, that's not family. And if someone walks away from you in your darkest moment, let them go. Let them go so far they can't find their way back. The truth is, I forgave Derek one day. Not for him, for me. Forgiveness is freedom. But I never forgot. Forgetting is how you get trapped again. The life I have now isn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it is mine. Built with hands that once trembled. Built with a heart that once cracked open in the desert sun. Built with a courage I didn't know I had until the day a truck drove away and didn't come back. And now, whenever I tell this story on quiet nights, I end it the same way I'll end it now. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or brushed aside, don't let that be the final chapter of your life. Write a new one. Step into it. And don't look back, unless it's to see how far you've come. Thank you for listening to my story. Before you go, tell me what you think in the comments. Would you have left that day? Have you ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up? Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Mabel's Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive.